This week on Quality Digest Live, teaching STEAM skills to deaf kids using drones and 3D printing.
That's right. Plus, we're going to talk to Dan Jacob of LNS Research about Industry 4.0. More on that when we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is sponsored by Viva's Vault Quality One, the quality management application that's complete and easy to use.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for July 28th, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
That you are, and I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. So, we talk a lot about STEM, STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math, or sometimes there's also STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And very often, what we talk about is kind of the lack of both women or girls and minorities within high school and so forth, taking an interest in, say, STEM subjects, so that they can be, maybe find a career or vocation in STEM-related vocations. So we talk about girls and minorities and a lot of the outreach programs that are available for them, which is great. But there is a population. Several populations actually, that also miss out on the opportunities for STEM and STEM education and STEM vocations. And these are deaf and hard of hearing as well as blind students. But there is work being done to introduce those populations into STEM education as well. So there is at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, also known as UAH, they have a program in conjunction with the Alabama Institute for the Deaf that is for hard of hearing students in grades 10 through 12. And these students recently spent a summer at what UAH called Droids and Drones. And what this was simply an educational outreach for deaf and hard of hearing students to come into the UAH and also Rochester Institute of Technology and Alabama Institute for the Blind and Deaf was also involved in this. And basically the program was just to use the idea of hands-on work with 3D printers and making a drone and flying a drone. They would learn about robotics and UAVs. And all this very hands-on. They would also take some educational trips, to science institutes and that sort of stuff, so they could learn more and get really hands-on knowledge about this, and maybe generate some excitement in them about a career in science, technology, engineering, and math programs. And also, this could help influence what programs they might take when they go to college. So it's a very interesting outreach program. UAH says they believe this is the only one of its kind in the United States that is specifically deaf and hard of hearing oriented. And I want to give a little bit of a plug here, honestly, because as I was researching this, I was talking to people at UAH and I talked to people at the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind, AIDB is what it's called. And I want to put in a little plug for them because they're doing something that I think is really important and really interesting. So AIDB and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf have partnered to create what they call the NTID Southeast Regional STEM Center. And the goal for this is specifically to improve access for deaf and hard of hearing students to STEM topics and STEM education. And they do this where it makes sense by providing educators throughout the Southeast who work with deaf and hard of hearing students. They give them the training and best practices for how to teach technical subjects to deaf and hard of hearing students. And this is important because very often the people who are experts in these technical topics don't have expertise in how to interpret it and present it to deaf and hard of hearing students. So they need to be taught, the educators need to be taught how to do this.
It's a special population. So
It's a special population.
different,
And well, and very often what you have is not all deaf and hard of hearing students go to something like the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and the Blind or Gallaudet or whatever. They go to mainstream schools.
Sure, of course.
And those teachers, they may have interpreters to help, teach standard subjects, but even if you invite somebody from industry to come in and talk to your students about STEM, they don't necessarily know how to communicate to deaf and hard of hearing students. So that's what this program is all about. It's really to train the trainer, essentially, in order to reach deaf and hard of hearing students. So if you're interested in this, maybe you have maybe you're deaf and hard of hearing, or you have a son or a friend or a daughter who's deaf and hard of hearing, contact the Alabama Institute for the Blind and Deaf and Blind, because they've got a very interesting program going on there.
Yeah, they do, and they're doing good work there, of course. I
Yeah.
mean, anything that involves STEM or STEAM education is something that we're really actively interested in, and I know that this program is one that really is important.
And you can also contact the UAH, obviously, University of Alabama at Huntsville. And they are talking to them. They are also looking at rolling out a program for the blind as well. This one was for deaf and hard of hearing. I got into a pretty good discussion with them about blind topics, and that is actually where they're going to. I got another minute here. Something that was really interesting, I did not realize that there were blind programmers. I mean, I guess I didn't think about it. I mean, there's no reason why somebody who's blind can't be a programmer. But having done a lot of programming myself, I can tell you that not having that visual thing in front of you poses some unique challenges, which blind people have overcome. And there's a lot of tools out there for blind programmers. One of the programmers for Google,
is blind.
maybe more than one, but I happen to read his blog, is blind.
Yeah.
Just fascinating stuff. I mean, there are a lot of programs out there. It's kind of the importance of bringing this population into STEM vocation.
And I mean, the purpose of technology is to help people interact more efficiently with each other and with the world. And I mean, hey, if you have a disability, that, if you're blind or if you're hard of hearing, some of these technologies are really important to help you interact with the world.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. Well, have you heard of Quality 4.0?
Yes,
I know what Quality 4.0 is.
I don't know. I've heard of it, but I don't know specifically.
Well, Quality 4.0, if you haven't heard of it, it's closely aligning quality management with Industry 4.0 to enable enterprise efficiencies, performance innovation, and business models. So essentially what it is it's another way of thinking about the fourth industrial revolution, which is Industry 4.0.
Okay.
Which really follows the first three industrial revolutions that happened over the past 300 years or so. So if you're interested in that, we've got a really good interview for you right now. We had an article from our friend Dan Jacob of LNS Research. We flashed it up there a moment ago. Quality 4.0, fresh thinking for quality in the digital era. And it's a really good piece. It also ties in with the Quality 4.0 Impact and Strategy Handbook, which is an ebook that's available now from LNS Research. So we're gonna bring Dan Jacob of LNS Research on our show right now, talk to him a little bit about Quality 4.0 and what that means. So Dan, thanks for joining us here today on Quality Digest Live.
Hey, thanks for having me, gents.
Of course. Really great to have you here. So let's get right into it. I mean, I quickly talked a little bit about Industry 4.0, but maybe you can help us dive in a little bit deeper about what that is and really what the changes are that affect quality professionals in Industry 4.0 versus Industry 3.0.
Great. Yeah, so one of the things that, when people think about Industry 4.0, they think about smart connected assets, right? So maybe that's something on your shop floor, maybe it's an asset out in the field, and that asset now through inexpensive sensors, you can now receive a lot of the data from that asset near real time due to connectivity. So you get the asset providing you with real-time feedback that comes in terms of a high volume of data that you then analyze with new techniques like machine learning, for instance, that can dig through that data, find patterns in that data that a human might not look for. You're taking data from maybe multiple devices and other systems like enterprise systems, understanding what those patterns are, and then determining insights from that data that drives new insights and new knowledge in the organization. And in a lot of cases, when you hear about Industry 4.0, they're really talking about the application of those technologies to machines like assets in a shop floor or again, fielded system. And that definitely applies to quality as well. There's a number of use cases out there where you can use data like that to drive 100% inspection or continuous input from other systems really to drive quality improvement. There's a lot more to it, though. When you think about Industry 4.0, that's kind of like the classic way that organizations think about that. There's also, from a quality perspective, you need to think more broadly, because things like collaboration, for instance, there's new technologies in collaboration like blockchain that can track data coming through from suppliers through your supplier quality management programs. Social media, both to track customer issues that might be experienced in the field, but also internally to enable to help build culture and capabilities in-house. And also apps, so mobile apps to give you access to data. Virtual reality apps to try to provide you with that input in terms of how a system might be performing in the field. These are all things that organizations are using to help drive improvement. So those are all different types of technologies. But the real thing, the real important aspects of Quality 4.0 are the impact of that technology on processes and on humans. Because when you think about quality, there's a significant human aspect. So the cultural pieces that organizations are really working toward addressing, and so on. So there's a lot of those capabilities and process capabilities. So Quality 4.0 is really the merger of that technology as well as the people and processes to drive new insights and increased performance in industry.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. So how can companies use Quality 4.0 strategically? I mean, how are they going to use it to gain a competitive advantage? I mean, what are they going to do with this?
Right. And I think one of the key things, I've had a lot of conversations with quality leaders about this over the last year or two. Even this week, lots of conversations with different quality leaders on this topic. And I think one of the first things that quality leaders need to do is to get educated. In many cases, if you look at, if you look at this technology, a lot of times there's initiatives around culture of quality, maybe risk initiatives and other initiatives there and it's keeping quality leaders busy enough that they're really not focusing on this really important technology set. So the first thing is to get educated. The second piece is to really get involved. You might be surprised that your CEO is likely interested in things like increasing predictability, or there might be a big data initiative. Let's find out what we can do more with data, or a digitalization initiative. Quality is actually one of the top quality improvement is one of the top use cases for initiatives like that. According to our statistics, 23% of initiatives that are digitalization initiatives are actually focused on quality improvement. So make sure you're involved in that process. And then finally, update your strategy. And I'm not saying to build a strategy around Quality 4.0 necessarily. What you should do is update the existing strategy you have in traditional quality to include Quality 4.0, because those initiatives you have already around, again, culture or risk or enterprise visibility to quality or metrics, those initiatives are actually improved substantially through Quality 4.0, and an organization can tie those to the strategic objectives of the company very effectively through a Quality 4.0 initiative.
Well, Dan, you wrote an article, I mentioned it in my lead-in that ran in Quality Digest earlier this week, and that was titled Quality 4.0, Fresh Thinking for Quality in the Digital Era. And in that piece, you mentioned this idea that a lot of these initiatives are being led from outside the quality function. So is that a good thing? I mean, why is that? And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Right. It's a little bit of both, right? So if you look at it, let's actually look at it from the bad perspective first, right? We just talked about how quality leaders need to really get educated and get involved. And without the involvement of quality leaders, kind of going back to that statistic I mentioned a second ago, 23% of these initiatives around quality improvement. And that's actually close to the top in terms of all initiatives. The topmost one is only 28%. So it's a high profile use case is driving quality improvement. But without quality leaders being engaged, the success of those projects will be diminished, because this isn't it's not like you're building this from ground zero. You really are building this on top of your traditional quality framework. For instance, if you're trying to drive new insights in supplier quality management, but you have many different fragmented systems, Excel spreadsheets, data spread all over the place, that's called low veracity data. So it's low quality data that you can't really trust. So you're going to drive lots of insights from that data, but those insights are actually going to lead you down the wrong path most likely. So you really need to have an overall strategy to improve this as a whole, and quality needs to be involved in that. So that's a bad part. Another thing that's maybe not ideal about it is the fact that from a quality perspective, there's in order to quality ends up losing some credibility in these cases. If you're not engaged in this, in an area that a lot of the organization is seen as being really crucial to the quality improvement of the organization, quality should be leading those in order to establish that credibility and drive visibility for quality and drive the quality culture. However, that's on the bad side. On the good side, what ends up happening is with this, this is an area where, again, instead of quality trying to pull other functions into quality improvement and into quality management, it's an ideal opportunity to drive a culture of quality. So you can really, because a lot of these organizations are really interested in this and are seeing this as a high value area, it's a great opportunity to really align quality with the strategic objectives of the company and with these other functions. As an example, if you read the article on Quality Digest, it's quality is only engaged in 6%. Quality is only leading about 6% of these initiatives, whereas marketing is actually leading slightly more than that. Product development is as well. So there's a lot of different functions that see this as a very high value opportunity to drive quality improvement.
And in the article, you also mentioned a few case studies that I thought were really interesting. There's a couple of what that you mentioned about improving manufacturing execution, better managing suppliers, and even transitioning to like a service-based business model. So maybe what's the common theme you can run through for us in all those case studies as it pertains to Quality 4.0?
Yeah, in working with a lot of those leaders, I mean, again, one of the key things we just talked about here a few times is that idea of getting educated. So they learned what the capabilities were. They got involved. They understood how this was going to align with their strategic objectives of the company and really build a strategy around that. So it's those three elements there. But a few other really important pieces. One of them is to really keep it simple. So you understand what use cases are out there so you can understand what you can do to enable Quality 4.0, and then really target it on those use cases, because once you get engaged, you'll find out that data scientists are a rare resource. They're so you're going to develop those competencies, and you want to really keep those competencies focused on what you're trying to address. Really drive value out of that specific initiative before you expand onward. And then the other piece on this is to keep agile. So you're going to find out, the whole point of this is you will find new insights. Maybe those insights are things that you were expecting to find when you're looking for it, right? And through some of the research that we're publishing, both in this ebook and upcoming research documents and in our executive roundtable we'll have later on this year, we'll have a lot of these other use cases uncovered to give you an understanding of what the capabilities are and how people are addressing this today. However, you still need to remain agile to understand, as you find out information, you can really adapt to that information and get to a spot where you're delivering, delivering that competitive advantage.
Well, Dan Jacob of LNS Research, thanks again for joining us today on the show. Again, the ebook is called, let me make sure I get this right, Quality 4.0 Impact and Strategy Handbook, right? And maybe tell the folks out there real quick how they can get it.
Yeah, so if you go to, if you go to LNS's website, there's the blog.lnsresearch.com/quality40 ebook. That's the link, or you can just search for LNS and then Quality 4.0, 4.0, and that'll lead you very quickly to the ebook as well.
That's great. That's great. Well, Dan Jacob, thanks again for joining us today on the show. Good luck with that ebook. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Again. Thanks again. Yeah, good stuff there.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Quality 4.0, man. It's the new thing.
Right.
That's right. Well, an old thing.
An old thing, I was going to say. Medieval.
Is medieval. Well, it's the Merchants of Venice. Not the Merchant of Venice, the Merchants of Venice. Okay. Lessons from the Merchants of Venice. was the name of an article we ran this week in Quality Digest, and you can see it right there. And it's written by Loish, I'm going to make sure I pronounce this properly, Loish Sadulay and Giovanni Tassini. Sadulay is with INSEAD, which is an international business school, and Giovanni Tassini is with, let me make sure I get this right, is with McKinsey. It's a global management consulting and analytics firm. Well, the lessons from the Merchants of Venice. Well, I mean, the tease here was that it was Shakespeare. Well, not really. They used Shakespeare in the title. It's really not very much about Shakespeare. But it is a really good example of kind of looking back in history for some lessons that we can use today, because the Merchants of Venice, the people that were obviously working in that time, 500 and more years ago, were at the middle of a very complex international business organization. And they were sending people out in the world to trade and coming back to Venice. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the way that they operated and the way that they employed their systems for maximum efficiency that we can kind of learn from today. And there's actually 3 things that the authors in the article kind of referred to, which I think are pretty important for considering maybe how you can use this stuff today. And I want to kind of read through these because I think they're pretty important. The first was network economics, and by network economics they really mean that they're kind of using the power of personal connections to make sure that their business is being done most efficiently. And really, these Venetian merchants used a lot of family members. I mean, as a trust was a big part of this. So they'd use family members to be their agents and go out in the world and take their goods out to wherever they were going and make sure they got a good price for them and bring that back. Now, today, many organizations recruit kind of in a similar way through personal connections, referrals, and there's some examples that they use from that. Now, the reason that works is that cultural and societal forces really help to make certain that that trust is repaid. In other words, when you have an organization where people know each other and they're referring others to bring them in, you kind of trust that they're going to do a good job in referring people that are going to do a good job for you. So you're kind of relying a little bit on your personal connections to make sure that you get people who can do the job. The next one that they referred to was what they call contractual innovation. There's something that the Venetians had in those days called I want to make sure I pronounce this right, the colleganza. I think that's how they pronounce it. Okay. Colleganza. And that was where the merchants that were there would provide the capital for the voyages, right? And then the agents would sell those goods in foreign markets, and then they'd take that profit, the money they made on those sales, they reinvest it in other products that they'd bring back and they'd sell in the Venetian markets. And then everybody would split the profits accordingly based on whatever their initial investment was. So that worked really, really well. Now, companies like Alibaba are doing things kind of similar to that. They have what the authors referred to as their Alipay system, which is a few years old now. But it works similarly in terms of verification and validation of goods and payment, and make sure that all that works, and then the profits are split by those that are invested in the systems. And the final one was what they call innovation in coordination. And that was really a big part of that was the government of Venice would actually buy the ships. Ships, of course, were, as they are now, a huge investment. The merchants really didn't have the money to afford those ships, but the government of Venice did. So the government of Venice would buy the ships, construct the ships, lease them out to the merchants themselves. The merchants then would go out and make their profit off of that. The example they use today is China. The Chinese government, for instance, is really doing a lot, especially in Africa, to make sure that Chinese companies have a footprint and are able to invest. So they're doing a lot of the kind of the groundwork there to make sure that the individual merchants in China can make their money in Africa. So, I mean, the lesson here is that history really gives you some good things to look forward to. If you look back, you can look forward to ways that, things that worked in the past that can work in the future too. All right, well, that is our show for today. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Thank you to Dan Jacob for joining us of LNS.
And I bet nobody understood that reference at all, except unless you're our age.
The graduate. Yeah,
exactly, I know.
It's actually 50 years old.
You're 30 years old. You're
right.
like, what?
Yeah.
What's he talking about, plastic?
But thank you, Dan Jacob. Thank you, Sophia Finn of Viva Vault Quality One. And in that vein, Viva Vault Quality One is our sponsor of today's show. They are the quality management application that's complete and easy to use. You can improve visibility and speed by managing quality processes, document control, and data in a single application for employees and external partners. It's as simple as Amazon or Google, so users can just log in and get to work from any device, anywhere. And Vault Quality One's control features ensure that only the right people take the right actions at the right times. Learn more at qualityone.viva.com or click on the banner just below, or just to the right of this video player screen.
That's it.
That's right.
That is the end of today's show. Thanks to Sophia Finn from Viva, and also Dan Jacob from LNS for joining us today. So, and well, we'll see you all at next week's Quality Digest Live.
That's right. Have a great weekend.
So long.
Bye.